nursery here in East Sussex, we have one of the widest range of citrus trees in the country. We sell everything from little starter plants to bigger mature trees, and lots of different varieties too. Because we've been selling these plants for over 10 years and we sell several thousand a year, we've got to know what works here in the nursery, but also what works for people growing these citrus trees at home. And they're such gorgeous plants that today I wanted to go through our top 10 tips for looking after and getting the most out of these gorgeous plants. The first thing is citrus trees need lots of light. The sunniest place you can find for them on a sunny patio or on a sunny windowsill in the house. It's the direct sunlight on the leaves that actually brings the flowers on, and they're one of the few plants that really like direct sunlight on the leaves. So the other important thing to remember with citrus trees is that you want to water only when the top of the soil is dry. So you want to let them dry out properly in between waterings. If you think in the Mediterranean about how you have a heavy storm and then it might not rain for quite a while, that's what you're trying to mimic at home. So you're waiting for the top of the soil to be absolutely bone dry to the touch before you water. If you're new to citrus trees, you might find that difficult to gauge. You might not always know by touching the top of the soil whether or not it needs water. So there are some other clues that you can use as well. This is a lime tree here, and although it feels slightly damp on the top, it's given me some other clues that it's thirsty as well. You can see from the leaves that it's slightly curling on the edges here, which is a sure sign that the roots underneath are a little bit dry and it's getting a bit thirsty. If you've got your own tree at home, it's a good habit to get into, is to just keep picking the plant up and see how much it weighs. If you haven't watered for a while, it will slowly get lighter and lighter. And if you pick it up one day and it's really, really light, then that's another clue that it needs a really good water. Just after you've watered it, because it's full of water, it will obviously feel much heavier. So if you're still stuck and you're umming and ahhing about whether to water, the last thing that you can check is you can take the actual whole root ball gently out of the plastic pot and have a look at the roots. And you can see on this one, there's some dark wet soil at the top, so it feels quite damp underneath, but it's a little bit misleading because underneath it's really, really dry and lighter in colour. So I know that this plant needs a really good water. When you go on to the watering, the next thing to remember is that they like a really, really heavy water. So this is about a 5 litre pot this lime tree is in, and that means that I know I need quite a lot of water. It's not a little enough and it's a good drink. For this I would be thinking at least a litre or a couple of pints of water. So I've got some in my watering can and I want to give it such a good drink that the water is going to come right the way out to the bottom of the pot. And when you pick it up, you should be able to see the water dribbling right out of the bottom of the pot like that. Citrus don't like to sit in water. They don't like soggy feet. If you left them in a puddle of water, you would eventually lead to root rot. And that's the next thing that's really important to remember. Don't let your plant stand in water. If you've got your tree outside in the summer and it's raining quite heavily, then you want to think about either chocking the plant up so the water can drain away, or putting some stones between the tree and the pot that it's in so that the plant is able to let that water run away and it's not sitting with soggy, cold, soggy, wet feet. Different citrus varieties actually have different hardiness, so you do have to bear that in mind. There are some citrus varieties, the more unusual ones like yuzus, finger limes and chinottos, which are really very hardy and will take -2, -3, -4 quite comfortably. There are then some citrus varieties that are definitely not hardy. So calamondins, sweet oranges, clementines, satsumas all need to be kept above 5 degrees. So they can go outside and they'll enjoy a summer holiday, but they definitely need to come indoors in the winter. The last little group is the lemons, and a lot of people love a lemon tree and a lot of people are surprised that they will actually take a mild frost. So a lemon tree, lemon mayers or lemon four seasons will go down to -1. Now that means that for most of us when we're thinking about citrus, you have to bear in mind what variety it is so that you can put it in the right position in the winter. And for most of us, the right position in the winter is going to be bringing your citrus tree into the house, into the brightest spot that you can find for it. When keeping citrus trees inside, it's really important to choose the brightest place in the house. So a nice sunny windowsill is what we're talking about. away from any radiators, away from drafts, and up off any underfloor heating. Another thing to remember about citrus trees is that they need regular feeding. So we recommend a summer and a winter feed. It's important for any plant when they're in a pot to have some additional food because there's not much nutrients, there's not much soil there for them to draw goodness from. But citrus trees are particularly greedy plants, and so we recommend a summer citrus feed and a winter citrus feed. These have got the nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus that they need, but they've also got trace elements, and the trace elements are what help the plant draw up the goodness from the soil and use it to make nice strong leaves and nice strong fruits. Iron, magnesium are all important elements that the tree needs to have the healthiest leaves and the healthiest fruits. If you find that you haven't been feeding or that the plant's in a very small pot or that you've not been using the right feed, you can often find that the leaves start to come through stripy like this one. So the leaves are slightly deformed, bigger than they should be, and in this leaf here you can see the stripy markings, which are a very clear indication of iron deficiency. If you use a balanced citrus feed every other watering throughout the summer and throughout the winter, you just add the granules, the little scoop into the water, you'll find that that keeps your leaves and your tree nice and healthy with nice green glossy leaves. Misting is something that you often see recommended with citrus trees. For most people in a normal environment, your house will be humid enough that it's not too much of a problem. Here in the greenhouse, it's really quite humid and we don't find that we need to do a lot of misting. But there are exceptions. If your tree is in blossom, like this one is here, you want to get as many of those flowers to set as possible. And misting at this stage can be really useful to increase the number of fruits that set on the tree. It's also particularly important if your house is very, very dry, you have the central heating on all the time, and it's also important if you've had problems with the fruit setting in the past. So if you've got the plant in flower or in fruit bud, misting is just literally watering one of these little spray bottles and just spraying the leaves in the morning or in the afternoon, later in the day, not a midday sun, just so that the water on the leaves raises the humidity. That means that the flowers are more likely to set and become fruits, and also the baby little fruit buds are more likely to stay on the tree. Now, if you want your citrus trees to grow on and get bigger year after year, you do want to repot them. You want to repot them once a year in the growing season. That's usually from about the middle of March through to the end of July, when the tree is actually putting on some strong growth at the top, and you want to just go up a little bit of a pot size, not too big a jump. So citrus do like to be in surprisingly small pots, but there comes a time, like with this one, where the plant is more than 3 times the size of the pot at the base. That's a good rule of thumb to use as a guide as to when you can repot. And as I say, you'd repot in the growing season into the next pot size up. So you're not going too ginormous, but you're just jumping, in this case, from a 3-litre pot to a 5-litre pot. It's important that you use a free draining compost and also that you have some extra drainage in. So I've got some just stones here. I'm going to put some stones in the bottom of the pot just to aid the drainage, particularly in the winter. And then I'm going to use some of this nice loose free draining compost. So a little bit in the bottom, and then I'm going to take the plant out of its pot. You can see here with this citrus that there are some very fine little roots at the bottom. It's growing nicely, so it's going to move nicely into the new soil. I can gently just ease those out a little bit so that I can move them into the new soil easily, but I don't want to be too aggressive with it because citrus roots are quite fine. I'm then going to put it into this nice free draining compost. This is a container compost, which you should be able to buy at any good garden centre. And I'm going to just make sure that there's plenty of compost all the way around the edge so that it's nicely tucked in all the way round. If you want to keep your plants smaller, then you wouldn't repot every year. You'd choose a nice dwarf variety and you'd actually only repot every couple of years and keep it in a smaller pot. So instead of going from 3 to 5, you could go from 3 to 4, and that would keep the plant a little bit smaller and a little bit more manageable, particularly if you've got a small house and you're having to bring it inside in the winter. Once you've repotted it into a new pot and you've got it nice and firm down with soil all the way around, then you want to give it a good water in. Plenty of water, again, running all the way through the bottom of the pot. Nice compost. This is going to give it a really good boost so that the tree grows on and puts on some new growth and some new leaves. Pruning with citrus is really quite straightforward. You're only looking to give your tree a haircut when you think it needs it. So it's not about old wood, new wood, nothing complicated. It's just a question of looking at the tree and thinking, oh, it's looking a bit untidy. This is a Kaffir lime and they are well known for being a little bit wonky. They go off in all kinds of different directions. And sometimes you start to see a branch like this one or like this one, which is just going off on its own in different directions. So when you prune, you're always using sharp secateurs and you want to cut just above a leaf node. So with this branch here, I want to choose where I want to cut it. I think here is going to make a nice neat shape and I'm going to cut just above the leaf node like that. Up here, this one again is a little bit wonky, going off in an odd direction, and I'm trying to aim for a neat lollipop shape. I'm going to just give it a little nip there, again just above the leaf node, and that just tidies up the plant a little bit. If you want the plant to just go off in its own direction, you can. It won't do it any harm, and if you like the natural look, that's fine. But if you start to think that it needs to be kept a little bit smaller, then you can prune at any time of year. Just prune back to the next leaf node. That's our top 10 tips for looking after citrus trees. I hope it will help you with your own citrus trees at home to get the very most out of them, because they're such rewarding plants. The scented blossom, the tasty fruits, and the great variety that are available to grow at home.